Hopefully you're doing well. I have some good news. The cats in this chicken barn, in only a few days, I've taken these motherfucking cats from wild beasts. They're now fully integrated into the chicken barn. They're full-fledged members of the chicken family, living in the chicken barn, eating mice, living amongst the chickens, drinking the chickens' water, eating the chickens' feed if they want, killing the chickens' mice, which is the point the entire time, and purring against my feet. They didn't do that first. They used to swat and hiss at me when they see me. Chickens, they say hello. There's people say hello. I was reading some old print. I got some old print. I'm a huge fan of old print. I'm a huge fan. Massive fan of old print. You know why I like it? You know why I like old print? Man, we just dropped a bunch of viewers. They're like, no! Do we have a shitty connection? Or what? Decent enough? Hard to tell. This Twitch has been getting iffier every day. Less consistent. Very clean in the beginning. I guess we'll see what happens. We've got a serious lag in the comments. We should not have lag in the comments either. It's hard to tell if any of these people are real that watch this. These real people. These just all bots. They're just buying time with bots, simulating an audience. So there's just no writing on here at all. There's no comments. How could there not be any comments? It doesn't even make sense. Aaron is human. I did talk to Aaron on the phone. He is human. That's true. I didn't realize I didn't read a name. So I usually don't even read names. I'm just reading comments. So I didn't realize that was you until I read the comment that you just made. The thing about old print, what I love about old print is stuff that it just says so much, you know? Like the reality is embedded in the construction of reality, right? So like everything that happens, it's just like if you imagine a detective solving a case, right? Like looking for clues and stuff like that. Reality becomes embedded in reality to every extent. Why? Because everything is connected, right? Universally. Both in the physical, but also in every aspect. Non-physical, right? So, for instance, a detective will look for, clues on a crime scene that are physical, right? And they paint the story and learn the story that is the true reality. by what happened being physically imprinted on physical reality, right? So you can imagine it'd be really difficult if there was a serial killer, killing people, and then he was like sabotaging his own evidence and shit. Like if he was the detective, he'd get away with it for a long time until the society learned how to read the physical evidence, right? And once they started to learn it on their own, how to read the physical evidence, and once they got sick of like losing and not solving crimes, having the same thing happen over and over again, they would eventually figure out how to look beyond the red herrings. It's the monkey on the typewriter effect, right? They would eventually learn how to get past the red herrings. They would eventually train themselves inadvertently to look for physical evidence that the killer wasn't thinking about. New physical evidence, right? And this is the fabric and nature of reality. You could have a person like, in this case, a serial killer. In this fictitious scenario, a serial killer making crime scenes, by killing people and doing crimes. It makes a crime scene automatically that's going to be investigated by the investigators. And this physical interaction with the environment. So the reality of what he's doing when he's committing a crime in the environment of the reality affects the entire reality, such that real clues are left. But in fact, so many real clues are left that a person cannot even game the reality, right? Like a person in truth can't even clean a crime scene to cover up their crime. It's just that all the common methods and standard procedures that police use, those can be covered up if you know them, because you know what they're going to look for. But the amount of physical change that takes place in an environment from an action is infinite. It's everything that comes into contact with, If you brushed off a pair of footprints, then you're going to have like a depression of sand, Whereas, and then once you understand that like somebody's brushing off footprints, then now you know the areas where the footprints are brushed off, and et cetera, et cetera. It's like a butterfly effect, and you can't stop it, right? It just all depends on understanding and having the motive to learn what's going on, right? So like if you don't give a shit, if you're just at the 7-Eleven, you don't give a shit what happened at the 7-Eleven parking lot, there's no reason, right? It's only when you have like the motive to look that closely, right? It requires the motive. The reason I like print media is because it like print media, especially old print media, it really has trouble making sense with the normal historical narrative. So I'm sure you're familiar with the entire, regular ass historical narrative. It would be the approximation of what you're taught in school, right? But old print media is great because it just doesn't make any sense, So I like to keep it because when you have Jews that write, because they have an empire, because they made an empire and they have so much money that they run print media. And the reason that they do that is because they're telling you what to believe, right? The Jews tell you and explain the story of how to see what's going on. And to do that, they own and create and draw the bounds of media and push out anyone else so that no one else can tell a story except them. Right? Now that works really good. So for example, this paper right here from the New York Times in 1914, This is like a very nice, like if you had this paper, if you went and bought this paper, if you went and bought this paper in 1914, this would be a nice paper, you know. This is nice print for 1914. It's heavy, I mean, relatively. That's heavier than newspaper these days. So like, if you don't remember your history, so 1914. This is the year that World War One opened. This is the first year of the war. Okay. And I'm sure you probably know the you know how the history of World War One is supposed to be thought of. You probably don't know a lot about the specifics of World War One, but you know, like generally, like the Hun are bad. You know, fight the Hun, war drive, save your bacon, stuff like that, right? You probably know all that stuff. And you know how you're supposed to think about it. But what's cool about an old paper is that a picture is really worth 1,000 words. And these motherfucking Hun look so kind. These Hun do not look like bad guys. These Hun look like heroes. This is a newspaper promoting heroes of some nice soldiers on their expeditionary mission feeding some hungry children in a country that they're occupying. You know that? I mean, I would say that's a fair depiction of this. This means more than like any word. Now, why would the New York Times promote Germany in World War One when New York Times is a source of declaring Germany the bad guys of World War One? How does that make sense? Yeah, you see what I mean? This is where fantastic pictures too, by the way. If you don't collect old print media, I will highly suggest it. I mean, it's fairly cheap because most people just aren't even aware that it's out. Most people just aren't even aware. They're not even aware that's out. Here's the war situation. Now, the photography is always just really good. A lot of the stuff isn't like an old print. In old print, a lot of the stuff is not online because they don't scan it. They just couldn't scan everything. There's no. Sometimes you can buy stuff that has. Sometimes you can buy stuff that there's not very many of physically, and so maybe the print and the photographs, they aren't there, to be printed or to be copied rather. Sorry, I'm like lost in the photographs because they're so. They just have like a very eerie reality to them. That's it's just very unique. What a different time. You can almost see how it works, right? You can almost like read. You can read like the stories of these people, No different than the military now. This is exactly how the military is now in the United States. No different, never changes. Nothing ever changes. It's all the same. You think that people get tired of losing? That's what I would think. Apparently not. Oh, here's some. What is that? Oh, that's Russian. That's Russian. I thought maybe those were. Those were Turkish. How's the connection? Do you guys get any of this video? It's had poor connection the whole time. So it's like I can't really tell. Look at these krauts. Those krauts hiding in the hay. They're fixing to fucking shoot somebody with 8mm in the face. Right there. Badass. I'll tell you what, the German army is the most badass. IMHO. Anyway. Nope. I gotta kind of be careful with this because, this table's like covered in poop. Like bird poop and stuff. I don't really want to get these papers all fucking old ass newspapers and shit. So, just for an example, right? Like, hopefully you like looking at these pictures and stuff. But just for an example, just to make a point. The reason that history is so nice is because in order to explain something like this, like, you can't explain this by the narrative, right? Like, you can see this and you know what you see, right? Like, you know what this is, right? You are not supposed to hate these men, right? Later on, though, you hate these men. You see what I mean? These men certainly died in the war. They're certainly dead shortly after this picture within the next few years. There is no reason for this to occur on the New York Times, right? In terms of the historical narrative. So there must be an account. What is the account? Well, let's turn to page 1. And that's the first one. Because if you're drunk and you're just like, whoa, and they want to get, you get the point through, right? The great seesaw in the east stands today with the Russians down and the Germans up. Invasion, defeat, counter-invasion, counter-defeat has been the history of the war along the vast Eastern Front since the day in August when the first Russian invasion of East Prussia was hurled back at the gigantic battle of Tannenberg. And just like that, you know the entire history. Or you should, if you're smart enough. The reason why the New York Times is printing a pro-Hun arrangement is because at that time, the Germans were the closest superpower to giving them Palestine. Because New York Times is run by Jews. Because at that time, the Jews had been kicked out of Russia for fucking up Russia. And they were kicked out with a vengeance, with malice. And Germany took them in. So they're Germany's allies, right? So the Jews in New York City, in America, they supported Germany, and they were the entire media. And so the American Pulse breathed what the media told them. They pumped to that beat per minute, right? And the Jews in New York wanted the Germans to be favorable because they want the Germans to win, because the Germans let the Jews in. And because the Germans are allies with the Ottoman Empire that holds Palestine. And they can't talk to the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire didn't like the Jews. They can't talk to the Russians, and the Russians don't have Palestine. The Russians don't like the Jews. Only the Germans like the Jews. The Americans aren't decided because they just got a country a little while ago. And they're just figuring shit out. They're just trying to figure shit out. At about this time, they're getting full-fledged factories built in the United States, and they're doing a transition into mass production, assembly line mass production, the capability thereof. They're getting ready to have massive amounts of money moved around in loans all through the United States to completely change the United States forever. Forever. That's what's taking place right now. It's very important that people read the New York Times so that they know what to think. So they are conditioned and prepared to know what to think. And since the Russians are killing and persecuting Jews in Russia and Eastern Europe and all their provinces, and because the Germans are the allies of the Jews, it's extremely important for Jews in the United States that ran the media to make sure that the Americans know that the Russians are bad. Because at this point, it's not planned to have Britain take over Palestine and give it to the Jews. And their best bet to get Palestine is through the Germans, by being nice to the Germans. And that is why the motherfucking New York Times in 1914 is good on the fucking Germans. Only a couple years later, the CIP starts running anti-Hun propaganda through shit like the New York Times. Boom, boom. So that's like the lesson about old print. It's just good. You should have old print, right? I was reading a story in the New York Times today. It was about the Tenney farm in Vermont. Is anybody familiar with Vermont? Vermont's really far away from me. I don't really like Vermont, but I think the story kind of makes a good point. Oh. The story kind of makes a good point. So the Tenney farm story is when they were building the interstate. When the United States government decided to build an interstate through the United States, which they did with they pushed that through with Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the host president to push through the to be the face of that thing, of that steamroller that was going to come. It's not like Eisenhower really did it. Eisenhower's powerless, just like every president. He just fucking signs his name like, yeah, I sign on it, right? Because he didn't have any choice anyway, because there's no presidents. And then they roll out the interstate system with a lot of money, a lot of resources. Now, Vermont was kind of a latter portion of the interstate system, right? So the Tenney farm was this. What they did was they went through. Now this story was like run in the New York Times like last week. So this is like a recent story in the New York Times. So this is what the Jews want you to be thinking about right now, right? Because they don't run things. What you got to understand, the Jews don't run stories. What you have to understand is that this this is not a story. This is an investment. This is cellulose parchment that costs money to cut down. Then they have to sheet it out, and then they have to manufacture printing machines. They have to come up with inks. You know what kind of chemistry goes into ink chemistry? It's something it's progressed in parallel with like nitrocellulose and shit for gunpowder for hundreds of years. Like the entire progression. Ironically, inks and their colors and textile dyes and textile manufacturing approximate explosives, because a lot of explosive compounds, a lot of high nitrogen compounds, are also really good at making dyes. I would say it's not the explosive compound. It's the explosive compound precursor before it gets, nitrosated or whatever. It's just an interesting thing to know. So anyway, the tinny story is that the interstate is getting built through Vermont. The interstate is getting built through Vermont. So they have a period, and Vermont's kind of late in the interstate, right? A lot of it's already built. The particular one would be I-91. Is it I-91? I think it's I-91 that goes through Vermont. So when I-91 went through Vermont, they had to buy out every single farm. So they did a period where they offered approximate like blue book compensation to buy out farms. People that held out for a while, they got less and less of an offer, and then if you held out and didn't give the farm, then they issued a hearing to do eminent domain confiscation. And so this would have been in the 70s, I believe. It's either like the late 60s, early 70s. So they confiscated farms by legal order from the ass of the federal government through the state, because the state had the federal government's testicles completely wrapped in their mouth, like both balls in their mouth. Like we have no shame. They just do whatever the feds tell them. And so this is the case, definitely the case with Vermont. Like Vermont has nobody that stands up, right? So the tinny guy is that guy in the farm is the example that's held up in the New York Times as like it's like the subject of like the human experience of like fighting tyranny. So the New York Times article, like they view the tinny farm as like, everybody's losing their properties. There's only one guy that says I've had enough, and he's gonna resist, right? He's not gonna give up his farm. So Tinny doesn't give up his farm. It's his family farm. His multi-generation. So always had it. Been there who knows how long time. His father worked it. His grandfather worked it. Right? It's his farm. It's his family farm. They build the fucking interstate around his farm, and then they can't like complete the road without taking down his property. So like they pause construction, do it on both sides, and they won't go through it, right? And they can't go around it for whatever reason. They decide they can't. So they give them the opportunity to up the ante of how much they'll give them for it. That's the plateau, right? And then they're like, okay, we're gonna have to take it. So they finally at one point they issue orders down through the sheriff's department. So the sheriff, the county sheriff, comes to the farm and tells the guy, like, you've been lawfully ordered to like evacuate the farm, and this is gonna be like your last night on the farm. So the tinny guy, he nails himself into his house with nails, so the door can't open. And then when the sheriff's department shows up and everybody shows up, he sets the house on fire and burns himself alive in the house. So he burns himself alive in the house with all his shit. He gets his ashes or whatever. They do like a town ceremony. the ashes go like 100 yards off the property in the woods, and then they build they do like a short memorial service, and the highway construction resumes immediately. Immediately. So that's the Tenney story, right? So this is like the story of New York Times, right? And so the reason why it's in there, the reason why it's in the New York Times for the Tenney farm, is because the highway department, the DOT, just did a public comment period that closed and decided to cut down a tree that was the last tree on the farm. So people that lived in that area had their entire history, because they sold out by sucking cock, by putting huge cocks in their mouth of the federal government. They sold out everything that they could have any pride in, and they don't have anything at all. And the only thing that they have left for pride is the fucking guy that burned himself alive in his house. And that's it. Because they don't have anything. Because they fucking gave it all away. Because they took the money. So this entire town of Vermont, which is no doubt fucking neck deep, ear deep in fucking communist propaganda by now, is being written about in the New York Times as a symbol of resistance, with a guy that fucking burns himself alive. And the town voted to cut down, or the government of the town wanted to cut down the fucking last tree that was remaining of the farm. And the townspeople were upset because they didn't want the tree to go away, because it was like the symbol of their liberty. So they were like, during the public comment, they said like, you can't, don't cut it down, just let it die on its own. It died on its own. So now it's time to cut it down. So they issued to cut it down, right? And so they said in this article, they said there were over a dozen people from like that locality that were there watching the tree get cut down. So, a couple of things from that story. One, you don't want to be, the Tenney guy. Yeah, the Tenney guy died, and he burned up. So that's the bad plan, because you burn up, right? But the other half of that coin is that you have to understand that there are a bunch of people that are there because they lament the tree that's getting cut down. It's a dead tree. So it's a dead tree. It died on its own. It's going to go anyway. Because they're there with chainsaws cutting down, people are lamenting that. And so they're there, right? Why are they lamenting such a thing? They're lamenting such a thing only because their ancestors gave up everything. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Vermont is straight alpaca sweater, falafel eating Bernie Sanders Commeyville. I concur. So I don't really like the the Vermont story, right? And I don't really like the New York Times very much at all. I don't really like Jew media at all. It's pretty silly. Anyway, I like real stories. So this is one of the things that I haven't talked about a lot is Missouri. So Missouri is really unique because if you didn't know this, Missouri was the northernmost state in the Confederacy, which a lot of people don't know. Like, a lot of people aren't familiar with that. So it's like the entire Confederacy was like underneath Missouri, and then there was just like Missouri up here. Like it was like the highest north. Like this is a fucking sore thumb sticking up between Confederacy and the Union. And Missouri is really unique because in Kansas City, what Kansas City was called during the Kansas City would be on the west side of Missouri. That's where barbecue comes from. St. Louis is on the east side of Missouri. So today, St. Louis is East St. Louis, basically, with a bunch of politicians and shit that live there, and it's pretty trashed. Like, it's a fucked up place. Kansas City is a lot better. It's also bad. It has a lot of gang violence. East St. Louis at times has been like the murder capital of the United States. The immediate surrounding area, like beyond East St. Louis, is fine. East St. Louis is technically in Illinois. So St. Louis is not as bad as East St. Louis. They're connected by a bridge. So, that's the point. It's kind of like all the same, So and then Kansas City, Missouri is, connected across the border across the border of Kansas, right? So these are like the two edges of Missouri, and they have a highway that passes between them, right? It's like east to west, and so Kansas City used to be called Westport, right? Which is um, it was like the gateway to the west. So if you were going to go out west, and go out into the Wild West, you stepped foot off of Westport. Okay. One of the things I haven't really talked about, which I think is a much better story, is Missouri. So, a lot of people aren't familiar with this stuff because the Jews don't like to talk about it. So, what I have here, this is actually a Harper's. This is a Harper's. This one's really old media. So, this one is from. This one's from 1863. And this is actually Harper's is actually Jew media also. This is about Mosby's guerrillas, this front. So this is a consolidated. This is a consolidated paper from Harper's, the Journal of Civilization, out of New York. It was printed on Saturday, September 5th, 1863. Just to give you some idea of the detail. I'm going to take a look at what's going on here. Here, we'll start off a little wider. And we'll just kind of move in. This is Harper's. So this is kind of their consolidated paper of where they expose and explain to the American people the idea of people that resist the government. So if you resist the the federal government, you are a guerrilla. Here's a story about the advancement through Chattanooga, that being Tennessee. Chattanooga. I was actually in Operation Chickamauga. There's some naval illustrations. They don't have pictures back then, right, for the papers yet. So everything's a drawing. Well, everything's a drawing. Look at that. Iron ships. Rifles were very common back then. You weren't really, men used rifles. There weren't any. There were some cities that didn't use rifles, but they were mostly like in the coast. It's a very, very different time. This is how drafts used to be done. Okay. That's how drafts used to be done. And the reason that they're wearing blindfolds, this was done up until World War One. After World War One, they were able to do away with this. So the reason that they wear that is because he's picking names. So this is like drawing short straws. Why that would be necessary? The only reason that's necessary is because people don't want to go to war. Okay. It's really conscription, right? Lots of interesting things like that. They used to wear blindfolds as a ceremonial thing for the draft. Here's some, let's see. We'll find some, here's some powerful, brilliant double glasses. Will show distinctly a person to know him at from 2 to 6 miles. Damn it. Where are these men now? We need these men right now for our optics. We need these guys to make a Mel-Dot scope. Let's see. There's some ambrosia, a stimulating oil extract. Here's some agents. Here they go. They're getting some agents right here. 50,000 agents wanted at the regiment hospitals for $1. Pretty cool. Pretty cool, these old books. These old papers. What I really wanted to show you was we were just kind of looking at the paper. But what I really wanted to show you was this. You know what this is? This is the raid on Lawrence, Kansas by the Missouri bushwhackers. They title this, what they title this, now this is in here as a catch-all because they group all this stuff together. But this is certainly the most prolific of all of the of anybody that was anti-government in the Civil War. The destruction of the city of Lawrence, Kansas, and the massacre of its inhabitants by the rebel guerrillas, which they don't name. Really kind of incredible detail. Seems like Jews. Well, Jews wrote it for sure. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. Was a different kind of story. I want to talk about a different kind of story. I want to talk about the history of the Missouri bushwhackers, which is obviously, you know, the Confederacy, right? Why? Because you're not going to get this story from anywhere else. You can get a story from really far away, from Harper's, with the guys that get paid to draw pictures. Or Quantrell has body parts buried here, right down the street. So anyway, the raid at Lawrence, Kansas. That's that is a raid. That is a raid that took place against Lawrence, Kansas, by what are affectionately known as bushwhackers. Okay, they are Missouri men who went into Kansas and destroyed cities. Okay, now the most famous among them is Quantrell. Okay, Quantrell. He's in like movies in the Old West movies, right? Quantrell. He's not my favorite. My favorite one is probably William Anderson, which is he's affectionately known historically as Bloody Bill Anderson, the murderer. Bloody Bill Anderson was a subordinate in Quantrell's Raiders, but his story is probably the best. He's definitely he's much more prolific than Quantrell in terms of his kill count and his temper. So, how do I start this? So Bill Anderson, the way that Bill Anderson started, he was actually a Kansas resident. So he started his roots on the border region between Kansas and Missouri, which is kind of a gray area, kind of like when they draw arbitrary country lines, right? It's kind of the same thing. Now, I guess we have to preface this whole thing with kind of the a new understanding of why the Civil War took place. A lot of times people have a serious misconception about the Civil War. So if you learn about the Civil War from the United States government, you will learn something along the lines of there was slavery. It is bad because people enslave humans. Therefore, the Union is good and the Confederates are bad. That is not the correct history of the Civil War. Okay? In the Confederacy, in the Confederate States, the Civil War is known as the War of Aggression. Okay? I got some cats out here hunting mice. They're fucking fully integrated. They're mice service. The true history of the Civil War, the true characterization as it would apply to an American that was trying to understand history, is entirely different than what you're told in school, what you're taught. And they have a serious mischaracterization of it. What to put it in simple terms without getting too crazy in depth, to paint a broad stroke that I believe is accurate. Now, the way that I would describe the Civil War is that the United States, right, in order to get a foothold from Europe, to get the European colonizing powers, like the true colonizing powers, the people behind the public power in Europe, for them to get a home base in the United States, they kind of just have to let it grow. So the people in the United States have to get strong and start building things, right? What happens is because the monarchy powers of Europe are employing slave labor, as has been done all over the planet for a very long time, right? Because they're employing slave labor, it proliferates to the United States because of commerce. So because of commerce and international trade, slavery takes hold in the United States. The original people that are in the United States in the merchant explorations are people that are trying to escape tyranny. So they're agreeing. It'd be akin to like answer to this ad in the paper to go to the moon and set up a colony. And it might as well have been that for people coming to the United States, right? So it's people fleeing tyranny. Fleeing the old ways, looking for something new. They get here, it's a very short time before the United States internationally trades into slavery, which is a very old system. The richest people in the United States employ slavery, and it quickly outcompetes the model of any other model of economic development. Because, why? Because it's free labor. The true colonizing power behind the United States, just like Europe, gets an opportunity with the Industrial Revolution, with the very early Industrial Revolution, which they have a visual of that doesn't exist yet, but because they understand the technology and its capability, they understand the paradigm of what can be created. And so they can shift the future and shape the future. How do they do that? By telling you what to think. And when you respond to what they want you to, when you read and see what they want you to see, and you respond with your gut intuition, which they already know what it's going to be, your automatic reaction unfolds the future that they want. And so what was happening in the United States was that you had a bunch of people that were employing their system of slavery and becoming rich off of their system. And they didn't like that. Because if you didn't know it, slavery is basically like having a bunch of milling machines that reproduce themselves, right? So that you never have any period of obsolescence. You never have a failure of the machine. It's just going to keep perpetuating, right? That's what slavery is. Your slaves breed. So once you have them, they stay, right? And it's perpetual. It's very slow. You know, this is not good. So there's a stronghold of stuff that the people that are really in control don't control in the United States. And so there is a wave of transition that is planned for the United States to switch over into industrialization with controlled oil. And that entire period is, it is prospected by, the Rockefellers and their predecessors in the United States as they go along building networks of drawing oil before anybody knows how powerful oil is going to be, right? But they do. They know. Because they always know, because they're on the cutting edge of science. So anyway, that's the backstory of what the Civil War is really about. The Confederacy is basically a bunch of dummies that don't understand this. And so they're doing the logical thing. They're basically just the people with balls that aren't completely cucked that are going to resist. If they really understood it, they would understand that their means of resistance has no hope of ever winning, has no hope at all. And they could have done other things that are more effective besides going to a straight war. Because they don't have any, you can't win against this machine like that. It doesn't work like that. It's not what the game is. So anyway, Bill Anderson's story, Bloody Bill Anderson, he was killed in Glasgow, Missouri, in a fight with the Union troops. He lived to be, I think, the age of 24. So he died very young. He killed a lot of men, a lot of Union troops through his entire life. And nobody really knows how many he killed. Documented, he's killed like over, 170, maybe 200 Union troops. Not all of it's good. A lot of it is like straight up pistol to head executions. But a lot of it's fighting too. A lot of it's like straight combat in the 1860s in the United States. And it all took place in Missouri on the border. Now, it was such a problem for the controlling powers of the United States that they had to go through New York and run very early propaganda, to make sure that everybody that was reading anything and using money to buy papers and stuff like that understood who to hate. And so the resistors in Missouri, who are on the western edge of Missouri between Missouri and Kansas, are the people that resisted the power. And they are, they're like on the forefront of it, because Missouri, like I said, is geographically sticking out like a sore thumb. And it's the highest northern state of, and the most western state of the Civil War conflict. And most of your stuff is fought along that entire strip, like from there south. And most of the shit in Missouri
is like these wild ass guerrilla battles. Except for, I mean, we had some conventional battles like in like Springfield and shit like that, but like out here, like in this area, it's like all just like crazy ass guerrilla warfare the entire time. So Bill Anderson's story, how it starts, is that Quantrill, like I said, is probably the most famous. Bloody Bill Anderson, he joins the Raiders, the Quantrill Raiders. They're called the Quantrill Raiders because Quantrill leads raids across the Missouri border into Kansas to kill Unionists, right? They attack outposts and shit like that, like Union outposts. Now, it's really funny because funny is a bad word. It's really it's eerie how similar things are, because for between now and then, between the 1860s and now, because like for instance, I live in Saline County in Missouri. So Saline County is the county seat of that would be Marshall, right? Marshall, Missouri. So Marshall, Missouri is a city that is has a lot more wealth than any of the other little towns. Most of the towns around here don't have any wealth at all. It's very poor, right? They're rich in the heart, poor in the material, rich in the heart, rich in the land. Not true with Marshall. Marshall always has money, right? So in the 1860s, Marshall was the hub where when Union troops would come over from the East Coast, they would come through like bases in Marshall. So Marshall hosted the invasion by the Union troops into their a foreign land that they didn't know, into this area. And they got killed by guerrilla fighters. And there's been a lot of conflict. The early guerrilla fighters are just like random people that live here, right? Because the Union is like expanding and people don't like it because it's federal troops on the land for no reason. They're aggressors, right? And so what happens is you have a senator in a particular senator that is really big for his britches in Kansas. It is an elected senator. Shit, I can't remember this fucking guy's name. What is his name? The guy that fought Price. So Price fought a battle against a Kansas senator, and this guy ran what's called the Jayhawkers. So if you're not familiar with like the term Jayhawkers and bushwhackers, so what Jayhawkers are basically is like the Jews and the bankers funded people in Kansas to fight people in Missouri. So because people in Missouri were fighting the Unionists while they were trying to expand into Missouri and take over Missouri. This is before in the infancy of the Civil War. Like people around the country don't even know about this history. So the Union was just basically just pumping soldiers into Missouri, like as a conduit. Like they were showing up on trains and shit, and then working southward, right? So they were coming around like a hook. It's like a hook, like a dog leg, because to the west is just fucking no man's land, open desert. So what they're doing is they're shooting in, because Missouri is on the farthest west and north. They're using Missouri as the hub of like engagement, so then they can go down to the south and then work from the west, because they don't have any bases to the west. Do you get what I'm saying? So this is like a grand tactical maneuver in the big picture of the Civil War. And so they start doing this prior to the Civil War, as soon as animosity starts. And so because they're working on the outskirts of Missouri, and because it's wild as fuck out here, especially back then, people automatically are just going to be fighting these guys, So there's like people shooting Union troops and stuff. Because of that, what happens is a bunch of nefarious, whoever it is, people with money on the East Coast that are, probably merchants, they start sending money to Kansas and organizing raiders from Kansas called the Jayhawkers. They're also called I think they're called Redleggers is the other thing that they're called. So the Jayhawkers, because of the resistance in Missouri, began raiding into Missouri border and killing families here. Not only did they do that, it progressed so bad that by the end of the war, they forcefully evicted entire counties on the western border of Missouri. So like no matter who you were, you had to like leave your farm and go to a different county and live there, and you had to abandon your farm. They were executing people here, like they would do raids on towns and execute people. The big one is Escola. So Escola got a raid from the Jayhawkers in like the early 1860s, and they went through there and did a like an on-site, live real-time court-martial and execution of like 8 of the men from that town that were like townspeople, and they burned down a bunch of houses, right? And so like because of this, it caused obviously like an aggravation between the people in Missouri and like the people in Kansas who are getting funding from the federal government. So it's not technically the federal government, right? So all the raids, like the raids in Missouri on towns and shit, are all described historically as like unauthorized by the Union. So it's basically it's essentially the same game book that they use in Afghanistan that was being used in Missouri, and they were just picking Kansas people because they're beyond the, they're like out in the like wild territory, and so they're picking them because they're westward of where the economic grid is created, and they're sending them eastward into Missouri to attack their own people using money. And so that's why the leader of the Jayhawkers is a United States senator. He ended up committing suicide, so it didn't fare well for him. That guy ended up committing suicide. He didn't lead a very glorious life. Unlike Bloody Bill Anderson, who was a fucking hoss, who was in the same group as Jesse James and Quantrell. So you're probably familiar with Jesse James. He's the most famous. The reason that Jesse James is the most famous is because Jesse James was entirely about money. So he was about robbing banks. So it's like non-offensive and sexy. He doesn't do anything against the Jews. Like he's not going after any Jews or anything. He's just robbing money, right? So it's like this romantic, easy to discuss encapsulation of the entire period. And that is the reason that Jesse James is famous. If you get to Quantrell, it gets really hard because Quantrell is like not, he's an opportunistic guy, but he is a leader. And so he's running raids that are killing a shitload of Union troops. If you go with Bloody Bill Anderson, okay, that's where you get like the really empathetic stuff, okay. So the reason also the reason why Bloody Bill Anderson is hated and called Bloody Bill Anderson, and why he is hated, absolutely hated, by Jews in New York City. So Bloody Bill Anderson's story starts with the reason that he joins Quantrell's Raiders is because his father gets killed by a corrupt unionist judge, and that is the first thing that sets it off. So his father gets killed by a Kansas Union judge, and then while this is going on, you also have simultaneously the Jayhawker raids taking place on the properties along western Missouri. So Bloody Bill Anderson starts to work with the ruffians and do like he's also simultaneously doing like horse thieving and shit. So they're going into Kansas and stealing their government bought horses and shit, and then like stealing property, and they're building up forces here, inevitably over the years. Where it gets really spicy is that they took in Kansas, in Kansas, it was a giant hub for Union posts, for Union military. So they came through Missouri and then expanded out to Kansas, so they can hook from the west, right? This is how they hook from the west on the Confederacy. The theater is called the Trans Mississippi Theater. If you want to historically look up any of that stuff, this is described as the Trans Mississippi Theater of war for the Civil War. Anyways, it becomes hard to once you know the history of how families are getting their houses burned down in Missouri for no reason, just because of a national economic beast. These also are not slave owners, by the way. You did have slave owners in Missouri. They're not prevalent. Most of the people in Missouri are very poor. But they shoot unionists. So what ends up happening is Bill Anderson, because his dad gets executed by the union, he starts going buck wild and getting really moto and shooting fucking Union soldiers everywhere. So he's just running along with a horse up and down the Missouri border. He moves into Missouri. So he's actually born in technical Kansas. It's a lot like, it's a gray area. He moves and fully encompasses the Missouri spirit and lives on the Missouri side of the border. He starts running raids into Kansas to kill Union troops. Where it gets crazy, and this is all due to his father getting killed. That's like the motivation of it, right? So it's a revenge quest. It's a classic tale of revenge. So then what happens is the Union issues lawful orders of an executive order to capture known guerrillas, because he becomes so prolific from killing so many Union soldiers that the Union figures out what his fucking name is, and they figure out who his family is. So they go through Kansas and have the Jayhawkers arrest, along with a Union patrol, arrest all of his family. So Bloody Bill Anderson gets, all of his sisters get arrested and they get held in a jail. And so they have to live in a jail for their lives, for the Civil War. One of the jailhouses is actually owned by, it's actually a house from the Bingham guy, whoever that artist is. Like, there's a bunch of cuck Missouri commie fuckheads. They'll take Bingham's, he's a painter, right? So like Bingham has paintings and shit like that. They're all over the thing. I think it's fucking Bingham. I don't fucking know. I don't know, because I'm not into that shit. So anyway, they have some artsy fartsy guy that they bring in down to Jeff City, and he is his house. He has like a big ass mansion, and he makes a studio on the 3rd floor. So he adds on a studio under his giant mansion house. That's way bigger than anybody else's house, as if that even matters. But I'm just saying, this is detail, right? Detail to the point. So you have this like artsy fartsy guy that's just like, yes, put the balls and the money in my mouth. I'll take it all. And he like leaves his house. He builds a 3rd story on it, gives it over to the Union. The Union troops imprison Bloody Bill Anderson's sisters in the fucking house, in this artist's house that's in Kansas. The fucking they keep him there, and the entire point is they put up posts outside so that the bushwhackers try to come rescue their family so they can get an engagement. So they put like heavy Union presence around the posts, and they hold their family members hostage. And so what's happening is Quantrill and Bloody Bill, because they got Bloody Bill's whole family, they got all of his sisters, he's doing like nightly runs out there to just like watch the jail cell, to watch this makeshift jail cell and keep an eye on his sisters, like at night, trying to get his sisters out. And then what happens is they get it's too much presence of Union, and so he can't do the raid. The fucking building collapses because the artist added on a 3rd story and is structurally unsound. The building collapses and kills his sister. So his sister dies in it. So now at this point, Bill Anderson's father got killed. The Union is in retaliation to his revenge, killing Missouri citizens and like raiding towns in Missouri and burning the towns to the ground. Then his sister is being kidnapped and his family is being held ransom, through the United States government. And so Bloody Bill Anderson then has to watch his sister get killed because he can't go in and get her. And so this is where things get really spicy, because he flips out. And Bill Anderson, because he has so much support, like once his sister dies, it really changes. Like there's a lot of people in Missouri that are like, yeah, I know this thing's so fucked up, but like, I'm not gonna murder. As soon as Bill Anderson's sister gets like killed in a collapse and they kidnapped her and she dies because of it, it just becomes like all hell breaking loose. So You get like, he gets like unlimited support, and they take like 400 Missourians. He runs a raid with 400 Missourians from like the towns around here, and just fucking like goes into the post. If I can find it. Hang on. Bill Anderson gets the support of about 500 Missourians and runs a raid into Lawrence, Kansas to kill all the Unionists and to kill the Union supporters of the town that are civilians, because they supported the Union, because they set up shop and opened their legs to the Union and allowed them to run raids from their town into Missouri and burn down towns. Through the Jayhawkers, which are led by a senator that took money from the federal government and bought equipment and guns and ammunition from the federal government funding, while they pretended like it was regular ass Americans, and it wasn't. It was just Americans that took the money, and they went into western Missouri and they killed and murdered and burned down houses. There are stories of how the Jayhawkers came into the Missouri and burned people alive at the stake. Like there's stories here about that. It's all very fresh. It's all very fresh in people's minds here, because it's still here today. Because Marshall is still the county seat. And Marshall, when I go to Marshall and COVID is going on, I see Marshall, Missouri with National Guard deployed. Even though this is rural Missouri, the National Guard is deployed there because of its economic relationship to the federal government. And because the federal government doesn't have a pulse on the people and doesn't care about the people of the United States, because it is a foreign power, and because they are alien and unfamiliar with the Constitution and the American public, because of that, they don't know how weird it is when they bring in National Guard and set them up wearing masks and start offering shots to the public. They have no idea how alien they look and how not into that anybody here is. Just like the fucking people in Kansas should have known that it's fucking weird when you bring in a bunch of fucking Union troops into an area that they don't need to be in. Anyways, after that it got kind of crazy, because he killed 150 people in Lawrence, Kansas, and he started pulling over trains of Union troops pretty much anywhere he was. This is where he earned the nickname of Bloody Bill, because he would pull over, he would intercept trains of like wounded Union troops from battles that were like trying to push north. He would like intercept the trains and just pull everybody off and kill them all. Just fucking, doesn't matter if you're like wounded or anything. Like if you're on the train, you're getting out and you're getting a fucking bullet through your head. You're getting a fucking slug. So this is where it like got kind of crazy, right? And this is the start of the story for Jesse James. So Jesse James is involved in the executions on the trains. He's in the same raids that Bloody Bill Anderson and Quantrell. All these guys get killed. So like Bloody Bill Anderson continues to fight Union troops his entire life. He dies on a hill in a rifle battle between Union troops and pretty much him, because he gets all of his guys end up getting killed through the years. And he dies at the age of 24 in Glasgow, Missouri, on a hill, an unmarked hill. Nobody really knows where it is. They just know he's in Glasgow. He was holding the mayor of the town hostage so that he could like hide in the fucking town. Or I don't know if it's the mayor. He was hiding in some Unionist supporters' house. He found Unionist supporters, and he would like go into their houses when he was traveling through the country, and he would just like take over their house and just stay there, kind of like a sniper team does in Iraq, right? No different than a sniper team. Sniper teams in Iraq, we go in there. I'm not a sniper, so I'm not gonna say we. I mean, we like Americans. We go into a house in Iraq that a family is occupied in, and we take the entire floor over. We lock the doors. They often, if the door can put a chain on it, they'll put a chain on it. You will have like the family conduct all the normal things that they do, so there's nothing suspicious, and then you'll operate a sniper outpost from it, right? As long as you keep positive control. You can't have them like leave and go running in the town and tell everybody there's a sniper there. That is what we do. in terms of Iraq 2006, I've seen it. I've been on missions where we do that. I've been on missions where we've lived in houses with Iraqis and they make us bread. I've seen it. There's no difference between that and going into a house with a Union supporter that is your enemy in Missouri in the 1860s. But that is the last place that Bloody Bill was when he got they snitched him out while he was trying to hide out in the house, and then he ended up running out in the field and then having a gun battle on a hill, ended up getting killed and then died. So that is the story of Bloody Bill Anderson. Yeah, Glasgow is a city in Poland. Yeah, that's they probably have some Polish immigrants or something. That's why it's called Glasgow. I don't know. Beautiful town, by the way. Glasgow, Missouri is beautiful. They also need residents. So Glasgow, Scotland. There's Glasgow, Poland. There's Glasgow, Scotland. Scotland's the big one. Glasgow, Missouri. I almost got a place there. They need residents. So if you're looking for a place, Glasgow, Missouri has extremely cheap real estate. I almost bought a 2-story factory for $20,000 in Glasgow. The only reason I didn't buy it was because I wasn't willing to do the work to repair it. But it was a brick 2-story, probably about 5,000 square feet factory that they were going to let me live in as a residential house in Glasgow, Missouri for $20,000. So just a heads up, there might be some good properties in Glasgow. Yeah. So anyway, and they also when I was looking around at the property in Glasgow, the mayor of the town came and met me and asked me to stay in the town. And said that they needed, because I was there with like my wife and kids, and he was like, we need people in Glasgow, sir. It's like a fucking Western movie. So anyway, if you want to help out Glasgow, you can go move to Glasgow. But anyways, I wanted to kind of tell you kind of the history of this area and how people think. And a lot of people here do not buy into the image of Confederacy and Union. They don't see it that way. They see it as they were living their lives, and then a bunch of money came in and killed everybody. Just so that you understand the difference in opinion. Now, if you talk to somebody on the East Coast, they're going to think that there's a bunch of they're gonna think that there's a bunch of slave owners that don't like black people and call black people niggers. That is not true. That's not all the case. And most of the people here did not partake in slavery. And slavery was a system that came over to the United States from its predecessor land and all of its holdings. And the United States is a merchant investment. The people that were partaking in the investment were unwilling participants of the tragedy of the human experience, and so were the slaves that came here, and all those people that made slavery possible are still in control of the world and still running the United States, and they are the people that have come up with the entire notion of BLM and human rights, and it is they're directly under control of Satan. I'm just saying, there's no way that you could have anything that evil. There's no way that you could have something so evil that it could do so much bad to so many people and make them kill each other and maintain control and have the balls to blame their own acts on people that are caught up in the middle of it so that they fight each other more. It's just unfeasible to even imagine. The only way that you would know that stuff is if you actually look into it and actual print media is a great way to prove a point, because you just can't lie, because the people who write it are the people who want you to know their story and the way that they want to see it, the way that they want you to see it, and not any other way. They don't want you to see it with your own eyes. They don't want you to see it with your own eyes, because if you were here, or if you heard of it because you were next door, then you could know of this with your own eyes and your own ears. They don't want you to know about this from your own eyes and your own ears. Why? Because if you knew about it and the backstory and what was actually going on because you were here and knew the people, you would be sympathetic. And because they don't want that, they have to draw little fucking pictures about it and tell you what's going on, so that you get a different story than what your eyes and ears would tell you. And that is the point of news. That is the point of news. I don't have an email right now. So anyway, I wanted to tell you this story. I wanted to tell you this story because the things that we're told are so radically different than reality, and the people that get wiped away by this stuff, like as the product of it, the people that stand up on their own and don't get any thanks for it and have to pay for it with blood, their entire memory gets washed away, and they're not the people that get remembered, you know. And you know, you could be a I don't believe in violence, but you could either be the Tenney Farm or you could be Bloody Bill Anderson. And that's what I wanted to tell you. That's the point of tonight's stream. You really are writing your own choose your own destiny book. I think things are going to start going pretty bad here shortly for the United States. And you should really think about who you are.